every description of God that I've heard holds God to be all-powerful, very typical, and all good. And I see earthquakes and tornadoes and disease, childhood leukemia, and I see all of this and I say, I do not see evidence of both of those being true simultaneously. If there is a God, the God is either not all-powerful or not all good.
Yep, there you have it. Thought-provoking American astrophysicist, author, and science communicator Neil deGrasse Tyson kicking off episode 21. It is a live podcast of an atheist, a believer, and a pastor walk into a bar. We are waiting for Luke. Suresh is not with us tonight, so until Luke arrives, we thought we just might have a bit of a chat, catch up on what's been happening. Of course, tanned and looking relaxed and chilled is. Of course, after coming back from Hawaii. How are you, Rich?
Yeah, good, mate. Yeah, had a great time away. Caught a lot of sun, which was nice.
Okay.
Quite different to my
normal. That you're not wearing your floral necklace.
Yeah, I didn't get one of those. They gave me.
It's an oldie but a goodie. You
had to. You sort of get it out your system, I guess.
Oh, yeah, okay. Luke's joining.
Hello.
Here he is.
Oh,
see the presence he has. He comes in, and we are all shifted around in our positions of authority or sustainability when it comes to intellect. Good on you, Luke. Well done, mate. You're a bit buffering, blurry as well, but you'll clear up in a sec, no doubt. Get some of that cider into you.
Yeah, let's hope so.
Rich, you're all ready to go. You're all fueled up. Was it a work holiday and a relaxing holiday, or both?
No, it was just vacation. So 10 days in Hawaii. Basically a late celebration of our 25th wedding anniversary for my wife and I.
Happy anniversary from whenever that was.
Yeah. So that was in December, but December you can't do anything except frantically get ready for Christmas, really. So we put that off to later and spent 10 days in Hawaii. We went to Big Island, which is the island of Hawaii. Couple of big volcanoes on there. Unfortunately, I didn't get any. Well, I say unfortunately. Rochelle says fortunately.
Yes.
No eruptions, but there was some tremors and earthquakes and stuff that were indicating something might happen. But
enough of your personal life. What was it?
Yeah, that's right. But yeah.
So would you recommend it to go there? Is there a feeling of America about it, or is it really not anything like that?
It's still very USA.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a US outpost, but it's there. But it doesn't feel. It's not as what would you say, developed or overwhelmingly. It's not like going to California or anything like that. However. So there's infrastructure there, but it does feel a lot emptier. But there's a lot. If you go to Oahu, where the capital is, Waikiki and things like that, it's very, very, very busy with tourists. I mean, there's a small population of locals and a massive population of tourists just overrun that island all the time.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah. But there's nothing like, they're fairly new islands made by volcanoes, so you can see the marks of volcanoes everywhere, especially on Big Island, black sand beaches, and there's I don't know, thousands of acres of lava field that you go driving through. It looks like the moon.
Didn't they film incredible. A lot of Jurassic Park there and
yes,
King
yeah,
Kong and movies?
Yeah. There's a lot of movies made there. Lost, Jurassic Park. And we went on the tour there last time, and it's well worth it. It really does.
It looks like Elvis Presley, Blue Hawaii.
Exactly. Well, we went the last trip. We went to what do they call it? A luau, to one of the particular spots that Elvis used to hang out and write his music when he was there. So yeah, big fan of Elvis. So I was in my element.
But people do find the strangest places on earth to inhabit, don't they? You know, place that is just constantly ready to explode. Is it terrifying? Do you there's a sense of where you're at and then the potential of something dramatic happening?
You know, yeah, a little bit, because we visited the Volcanoes National Park and it's constantly steaming, and there's another one where there's sulfur patches where you got to be careful if you can't stay there too long, because there's like sulfur dioxide coming out of the ground choking you. it's just underneath the surface.
Wow.
You know, we don't know enough about what goes on there. We sort of guess that if there's some earthquakes and it's starting to bulge, something may or may not happen. That's about as close as we get to predicting stuff. So we're not too far removed from our understanding that the people had when they worshipped the gods they inhabited the volcanoes. We're not too far removed from their understanding. So it's pretty. You feel close to nature. It's just magnificently beautiful. There's one thing.
Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, there's on the way out, we had this really surreal experience. So we took off in the dusk from Big Island, and so as you break through the clouds, because there's clouds covering the whole island, you break through the clouds and you start to level off, and then you look sideways and you're looking into the side of the volcano. It's still higher than your, and you just go, "Oh, that's big." That's big. It took a while to get higher than it, so it's
fantastic.
Very different Perth.
Yes, I saw a doco the other day, which was something we might touch on down the track a little bit. The theory of there being the hollow Earth and the civilizations that live down there, and people who swear by it. It's absolutely fascinating. It's a huge part of Christendom too, apparently.
It can't be hollow if it's flat. Come on.
Well, that's true. There's the paradox right there. So, anyway, look, I don't think Jace, Luke, and I have had anything very exciting to talk about.
Well, I don't know.
Well.
We've got a Hawaiian theme going tonight. He's been there. I'm wearing it.
Well done.
Very nice.
Luke, well?
I'm well, gentlemen. Just you're running on time as usual, and you know, I feel like I'm really ahead of the game. You know, still sorting out my microphone and everything. I was like, please keep talking about Hawaii so I can get my tech sorted.
Well, we did that in anticipation.
Who is the new guy? What's his name? Rich.
Yeah.
Steady on.
He looks. He's going to be a good addition.
Bit of a Bible basher, but we'll sort him out.
Oh, great.
So, Luke, we were supposed to start at 8 o'clock UTC8, not 8 o'clock Luke time.
Mate, Luke time is, it's not quite Greenwich Mean Time. There's a little bit of flexibility to it. I think I'm on daylight savings. That's probably what it is.
That would explain
so
it.
the official start from this podcast from here on in will be about 25 past 8. That's when we intend to start. If we get going by 8 o'clock, we'll be laughing.
You need to do what all my mates do and just tell me that it starts at 7:30, and then at 8 o'clock I'll be here sorted.
Excellent, mate. That's too easy. We can do that. So anyway, in your absence, we did the intro, but we decided just to have a yarn while you were getting yourself together. So we've done that now. So we'll officially kick off tonight's podcast, I believe. We all good to go?
Yeah, go for it.
I do want to just
right.
last just quickly. I do want to say, hi, Rich. I've missed you.
Hey, Luke.
It's been a long 4 weeks, mate.
Yes.
Isn't it?
Yeah, holding the fort against these atheists.
Our ratings quadrupled in your absence, by the way. It's now the most listened to podcast in the world. Before we start off, Fenton is with us. Fenton, good on you, Fenton. Thanks for coming back. Apologies if you tuned in last week. Of course, we had a number of, in fact, everyone except Jason and I were sick, and it was actually perfect timing for me to not do it as well, because it was It was crazy. So welcome, Fenton. Good to have you on board.
I still sat here at my desk and debated myself about this very issue.
Really?
Didn't get very far because I agreed with me.
Depends which voice.
That's right. Okay, so look, let's kick it off. This podcast, of course, was created by me and Rich. I wanted to try and find out more about the claim that God is real. Now, I was a believer for 25 years. If you haven't heard the story before, I'll make this incredibly brief. What I always felt was God disappeared as fast as he arrived. Now, as someone who is not convinced that there is a God, I have been asked from time to time, if you're not convinced there is a God, why do you spend so much time talking about that which doesn't exist according to my lack of belief? Now, that is a very good question, a poignant one, I think. The late atheist Christopher Hitchens summed it up perfectly for me with his bestsellers titled, God is Not Great, How Religion Poisons Everything. Now, I see religion as far more damaging to the world than just about anything. It fills people with guilt. It gives reason to start wars. It divides people. It interferes with important progressive medical research, to name just some of the many negative impacts that it has on people on this planet. Now, it makes outrageous claims of miracles and the effectiveness of prayer. It tells people that they can be cured of anything. And you've only got to look around on YouTube, according to the charlatan Benny Hinn, whose whole ministry is basically built on bullshit. It fills kids' minds with fairy tale stories. Kids grow up believing. This is a separate. This is what I got to when I was thinking about this. Is interesting. Stick with me. Kids grow up believing in Santa Claus, the Tooth Fairy, and the Easter Bunny, the most popular. But as they get older, they find out it wasn't true. They didn't actually exist. Well, let's hope that they find that out. Some people. But it's just good, harmless fun. Now, they're taught, if they're involved in a Christian family or church, about Noah's Ark, talking snakes and donkeys, miracles, resurrections, and other totally unprovable stories. They're not told it isn't necessarily true. In fact, they're told the opposite, that it is 100% true. However, I don't think many parents actually tell their kids that there is not one iota of evidence to support this story of God and Jesus, the same way there was no proof to tell them when they worked out or were told that Santa, the Tooth Fairy, or the Easter Bunny also aren't real. Is that the best way religion should be presented to kids who should only know truths and facts? We tell kids that Santa is real with no evidence, but we make it look like we're really leaving things out. We put cakes and beer on the table to make it look like Santa had been. We do the same with the Tooth Fairy with zero evidence, but then we fake a visit with money. We know how much kids love money. So what's the best way to convince them? Bribery and untruths. And we hide Easter eggs and tell the kids that the Easter Bunny left them. So in reality, from us adults, it's simple deception. Now, I have no issue with any of those things whatsoever. It's great fun, and I would be a poo-poo person if I didn't like it. But then we tell our kids that there's a God. Now, we can't show them this God. When they ask us why God can't be seen, or why we can't show them, we're actually stuck with the same problem. Like when they ask to see Santa, we have to lie to them. Why? Well, because we don't even really leave fake evidence to trick them. We simply tell them God is real, and as kids, they believe us. We tell them Santa knows who's naughty and nice, and we tell kids that God is watching over our every move. So by the time they become young adults, in spite of never seeing any evidence to support their claim, they believe in God so much that their faith is unquestionable. I think this is fascinating, and we should talk more about it. We are live right now on YouTube and Facebook. G'day, I'm your host, Peter Rowe. You are a part of a live podcast on Facebook and YouTube on this Wednesday, the 22nd of May, 2024. Welcome. Great to have you with us tonight. Please be involved. If you've got a question or a comment, do what Fenton has done and jump on our Facebook or YouTube and put a comment or a question in, and we shall no doubt talk about it. Tonight's topic is what I just mentioned. What's the difference between Santa and God? Suresh is off, as I mentioned before. Rich has been overseas. He is back. We've got the charismatic Luke and the undefinable Jason joining me. Welcome, gents.
Irascible.
What's that? Irascible.
Irascible.
I've never heard that word before. What does it mean?
No, I don't know. I just heard it once, and I thought that's a good word to use.
Okay, the irascible Jason works for me. I think this whole issue of belief, deception, and reality is very important. And if we want to delve deep into it, we might just come up with some reason as to why we as humans create the intangible, the unknown, the unseen, the mystical, as we have throughout history. Because by and large, it's fun, it's good, it's escapism. I don't think we can package up religion the same way, although there are many, many things in common. So I want to try and uncover some truths behind what is often a charade. I first want to ask you at home, what were you told when you were a kid about Santa, the Tooth Fairy, or the Easter Bunny? I know for me, it was not so much about the Tooth Fairy, but certainly Santa was very real. So I think, Luke, we might start with you. I'm genuinely intrigued as to know how the dynamic works for you when you've taught your children about what you believe to be real, and in the hope that they will accept it and believe it as well. They're depending a lot on you for their reality, for their truth. Is there a sense of confusion, do you think, when kids discover that 3 of the things that you might have told them about ended up being false? There's no Tooth Fairy, there's no Santa, and there's no Easter Bunny, but the last one is sticking. Has that ever been a discussion point with you and the kids?
Whoa. Hang on.
Welcome back, mate.
Listen. Actually, is my mic okay? Because I think it is switched over. So as long as you can hear me, I need to preface all of this with a couple of quick things.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, my kids are still of an age where this all is going on. And I don't know about you guys, but it's certainly real in my house. The reason I say that is because, number two, my kids have access to YouTube, and sometimes things pop up and it's like, oh, cool, Dad's on YouTube. And if this video was to come on and they were to have a bit of a listen to it, kids, I want you to know, I don't know what these 3 men are talking about. It's all real.
It's
but
the absolute truth.
So what I want to do is I'm going to talk in the hypothetical. If
Isn't that funny? Sorry, if I can just jump in. I never even considered the possibility that Uncle Pete just ruined so many kids' lives, and some adults, including Fenton.
He's a bad man, kids. Don't listen to him. So I'm going to speak from the hypothetical that if those things weren't real, how I would anticipate it. So no, okay, it is a unbelievable. It's actually a really, really good discussion. And first of all, I see. I'm one of those households where we're all in on all of that. So Tooth Fairy visits, Santa's real. We actually set up a fairy garden at the side of our house, and fairies regularly come and visit and give little gifts and notes to the girls, and they get home from school and they run and they check it all out and they love it, and they plant little plants and stuff like that. So there's a lot of this. There's a lot of this magical stuff going on. Now, in Christian circles, certain Christian circles, that would be certainly frowned upon. And not just in fundamentalist, ultra conservative, but in pretty mainstream ones. And I've had that discussion, and certainly, being coming from ministry, being a pastor, and being in leadership, I've been exposed to all of that. And it is something that Tash and I, my wife and I, have had to really discuss and kind of figure out. We individually never saw an issue with that. But to take our faith seriously, and to people that we know and loved and respected who had issues with Santa and the Tooth Fairy and the Easter Bunny and stuff, we kind of thought, okay, well, let's actually think through this and explore it. And firstly, to not engage in this sort of stuff, I think there's no faith grounds, there's no biblical grounds for any of that, for starters. And so then it just comes down to, is it a good idea or not? And I'm not losing track of it, Rowie. I will get back to the God question and how that ties into it. It's really important.
I think what you're talking about is absolutely fantastic. It's exactly what I was hoping we would learn from that perspective. So yeah, go for it, mate.
Great. So it was a point of discussion, and it was one of those things that almost sort of happened implicitly. We spoke about it, and it it was just always a part of our house. We kind of went, we don't want to deprive our kids of this. But I never really formulated it in my head as to why we kind of came to that decision. We just kind of both like, yeah, we're in agreement with this and let's just run with it. And it was only recently we had some friends over from church, and one of them there, she was pregnant at the time, has recently had a baby, and my girls love her, and they quickly ran and said, "You got to come see this," and they went and showed her the fairy garden, and it was like, "Oh, we have the fairies come and visit, and they do this," and so I was having a chat with her afterwards and having a bit of a laugh and saying how often they will have encounters with these fairies where they'll get letters and stuff like that, and she was kind of going, it was almost implicit, like how are you allowed to do that effectively? From a faith perspective, is that a good idea? Is that not a good idea? Is that against believing in God, or is that? And in explaining it to her, it almost articulated everything that I'd never actually formulated in my head before. It was like, oh, that's how I feel. This is why we came to that decision. And what I was saying to her was, there is a beauty and an amazement and a wonder, and like that in itself is enough for us, to just see that on our girls' faces. And Christmas is a very special time for us. We go all in, and there's Easter hunts and stuff on Easter, and certainly the rates have gone up for the tooth fairy. Let me bloody tell you. But she certainly does visit. And when I was explaining this, I was articulating, saying, we talk to our kids about God, and trying to explain this concept of this thing that you experience, you encounter, you feel is real, according to us, and yet is not a visible thing, is not like a human being that you can see, or is not so it's a different relationship. This idea of faith, this idea of belief, we try and kind of conceptualize it. It probably comes a bit easier to kids than it does to adults. So I might have even been over explaining it to them. But the way that we figure is, how could I expect our kids to believe in something beyond themselves, something that's bigger, something that they can't quite understand, that is, in a word, transcendent or magical, or that defies explanation, and yet have all of these moments where we could allow them to experience that in ways as they grow up through Santa and fairies and the Easter Bunny. It was like, if I was to say all of that's real, that's crazy. I'm sorry, all of that's not real. That's insane. We don't believe in this. We believe in God, and actually shoot all that down, and then turn around and say, oh, but you should believe in this supernatural God. Like, you should believe that there are things beyond our understanding, only in relating to this particular aspect. It's a big ask. It's like, why would you shut down all of these other things, this idea of wonder and amazement, and that there is something more, that there is something beyond ourselves, there's something greater that I can understand from what I see. There's a hidden thing behind the world that they're seeing with their original senses. How do you shut down all of that in the sense of one thing, and then expect them to do that when we're talking about God, right? And so for me, and for Tash, it was more about, how do we nurture their sense of wonderment? How do we really lean in and help them understand and see that there is a joy to behold? There are things that they can't quite grasp or understand. And then it's almost a natural thing. Now, for me, we differentiate between the tooth fairy and God. But I understand from an atheist point of view, they're probably one and the same, and that's totally okay. But in the eventual growing out and understanding that these things are, mum and dad were doing these things, the worry is always there's going to be a big betrayal, right? They're going to wake up one day and go, how dare you have lied to me all those years? But in reality, that actually doesn't ever happen. There's a sense of developing maturity and understanding as they grow, and they kind of go, oh, okay, maybe this isn't what I thought it was, but I totally understand why mum and dad did that. I understand the joy that brought them, the joy that brought us as we grew up. And And, you see the older siblings still get involved and keep it going for the younger siblings because they kind of get it without even a conversation. But for us, the most important thing, and to finish off and to answer that question, is I love the sense of nurturing that wonder, that realization that there is something more, that there is a transcendent thing that they can encounter and have that mature into their faith. Rather than simply just be like, oh, we pulled the rug out from under you, but this one's real. It doesn't really work like that in real life. And I think it's a good thing.
Which is just as well, I guess, because it would be a really difficult proposition to try and answer that, because one of the similar thing that all three that we talk about is about giving gifts. It's about money, it's about chocolate, it's about presents. So in a sense, we're buying them a fantasy by offering a reward. And I can't think off the top of my head any belief system that kids have, certainly from the Western part of the world, where they believe in something without there being some lure, if you like, some reward for believing in it. And I think you articulated and talked about your situation perfectly. And from a Christian perspective, that's true. You've got a replacement for the three things, as it were, that weren't real. Guess what, kids? This is real. This is part 4 of the journey on the mysterious and stuff. But for a family that doesn't have faith, and I can't remember as a kid, I remember being absolutely devastated when I found out that Santa wasn't real, and this was only last year. So it's been, it was horrible because it was the most incredible thing for a kid to believe that Santa would come. There was no fear. We had no chimney. We didn't worry about the logistics of that. We just saw stuff in the morning, believed it was real. It was a beautiful thing. And it was never, there was never crossover discussion between that and religion. But I'm just wondering, I'd like to.
You've got evidence, Pete. There's evidence. You see Santa Claus at the shopping centre. He's real. There's presents under the tree. They're real. There's money under the pillow. The tooth fairy's real. Easter bunny's real because there's real Easter eggs around the garden.
That part of it is true.
Whereas, when I go to the shopping centre and I see Santa, I don't go to church and see God.
Yeah, and a valid point. And I have been Santa in the past too, so I can guarantee. And kids, lock your ears, because Uncle Pete's going to shatter your world of illusion again. That's right. But I mean, I'm just wondering if what would you say? And it would be perfectly normal and understandable for an inquisitive kid. They said, "Dad, why have you lied to us about these 3 things?" And I know lies are a hard word, but realistically, it is a lie. Let's call it a little white lie about these 3 things, and then putting you on the spot saying, "So, but you're claiming this one. What proof have you got that this exists?" And I think only the fact that kids are so innocent is that allowed a lot of people to get away with what they've gotten away with, which is telling fibs, as it were, and bribing them, as it were, to believe in it. But then you're stuck with the God thing, and there's really no. What would you say to them if they challenged you on that?
I would say, as you get older, there is a significant amount of factors at play that really will just take the magic out of the world. It'll take the magic out of your everyday life. One day it's acceptable to want to be a fairy scientist when you grow up, and then at some point it's not. You need to be an accountant. And there's nothing wrong with being an
accountant. Come on.
But it's like there are things in the world as you get older that you have to deal with, and it's not good or bad. It's just reality. That's life. It's part of growing up. It's part of maturing. But when you are able to experience the magic and experience the joy and the wonder, there is something really special about that. And so it may have involved deception, an element of deception. It does involve an element of deception, is what I would say. But that element of deception was done in order to maintain and help nurture that sense of joy and wonder and magic. Because even though there are factors outside of that as you get older that will challenge that and say that they don't, and even though these things may not be real, that doesn't mean that there isn't magic, there isn't wonder, there isn't things beyond our understanding. There isn't something that just because we can't see it, touch it, taste it, and feel it, that it doesn't exist. That's what we believe as part of the Christian story. And it's different to Santa, it's different to fairies, but it still retains some of that wonder and magic. Now, I wanted to help nurture that to flourish into this so that we can continue having this discussion. And if they would say there's no evidence for that, I'd say keep looking, explore, ask the questions, go on that journey. In fact, that's a big part of how we raise our kids with faith, which is a whole nother discussion around it's not believe what I tell you, it's ask questions and let's explore. And I mean, it's a flow on from the stuff that we've gone through theologically and all of that.
Luke, how would you feel if one of your children, as they get older, say they're 15, 16, 17, how would you feel if they actually came out as an overt and aggressive atheist?
Oh, well, it wouldn't change one single bit how I feel towards them. It'd be the same thing with sexuality or with any of that sort of stuff. It just wouldn't alter our relationship one bit.
So if they didn't share your values, you don't think that that's going to become a familial conflict?
Oh, I think, yeah. I mean, it'd be a challenge. I mean, I wouldn't like it, but you know what? At the same time, if that's, I would recognize that as potentially part of their journey, and maybe one that they've reached the end of. They may go the rest of their life in that. And for me to try and coerce or control that outcome wouldn't be loving. And this is where we forget. Anytime we bring coercing or control, it's not love.
I always love your perspective on these things. It's just so understanding and so empathetic. You know, it's. And I don't put that down just to your Christian faith. I think that's actually just you as well, being a genuinely nice guy.
Thanks, mate. I appreciate it. Look, I think that's the roll of the dice that I have to deal with in encouraging our kids to grow up asking questions. It's hard. They come home from school. They all go to Christian schools. And I say, what did you learn today? Oh, Noah's Ark. Okay, cool. And then I have to kind of help reteach that actually God didn't drown the world. I know your teacher told you that, and it's uncomfortable because it's like they've got someone in authority that's telling them something, and this is how it is.
Is Noah's Ark taught as a factual story or as a parable?
Well, usually factual.
Factual,
right? Okay.
And this would be great discussion for another time, Luke, because that is. And my first question would be on that discussion would be, that a Christian school is going to teach things that you fundamentally disagree with. My question would be, why the hell would you send them to a Christian school to learn stuff that even you don't agree with? They would learn more about the world just going to a state school and leave all of the Christian teaching and facts as you see them to them. But I don't want to put myself in a position of judging you for sending to a school. We did the same thing. We sent our kids to Arranmore, which is a Catholic school. What a complete waste of time that was. I mean, it's just, anyway, that could be another whole discussion. I like that. But Jace, clearly you haven't maybe thrown the whole fairy tale thing out, or the tooth fairy, or the Easter bunny and stuff. So just wondering what's happened in your family, and can you explain why you become who you are? I
now have 4 adult children, and we did the whole thing that everybody does. I mean, it's popular culture, and if you push against that, the kids are going to be ostracized. So you don't want that. And it is a little white lie. I don't think there's any harm in doing it.
No.
And again, very often when I say these sorts of things, I say it with some trepidation, because I don't mean to offend either Luke or Rich in some of the things that I say, but it's just, I guess, my perspective on things. I actually see, forcing is the right word, inculcating your children into a belief structure of any religion as actually being damaging in the long term. I really do. And because as an atheist, I don't see any evidence of God or the supernatural, right from the get-go, my children were never taught that. And in fact, in our household, religion was treated much the same way as sport. If you want to enjoy that, you go and enjoy it, but just don't bring it back into the house. All right. It's just not, it's not appropriate here. And so the kids grew up not believing in any form of religion, and they grew up not believing in AFL. And to me, that's perfectly okay. I still love them.
You're a heretic.
But yeah, I mean, look, again, I talk about popular culture. And of course, if you don't believe in AFL or sport in general in Australia, you can be ostracized as well. But it was always open to them. Luke, much the same way as you give your kids options, so did I. And if one of them wanted to practice some kind of religion, I would have no issue with that. But I would ask questions. And I'm guessing that you would do the same thing. You have
100%.
those familial conversations, and you put your perspective. And I've brought them up to ask questions respectfully, and to always challenge things so that they can understand it better. That doesn't mean an argument is about pushing your point of view. An argument, let's call it a debate, because that's what it should be. A debate is about trying to understand the other person's perspective because it may modify yours. We never go into a discussion thinking that I'm going to win this discussion. It's an exchange of ideas and hopefully a broadening of understanding. Even if you come away from it maintaining your point of view, at least you've learned that other people do have a different perspective, and that's okay, as long as they're doing the same thing and they're not trying to push their influence onto you and make you believe things that you're uncomfortable with.
And that's one of the popular feedbacks that we get from people while they enjoy what we do, is because normally if you put a couple of atheists and a couple of Christians together who are, diametrically opposed to everything that's said, it can be a very heated place. And I mean, there's been a tiny little bit of friction, I guess, in the past where that naturally occurs. But by and large,
the thing is here, we all have the same values. The difference is the belief in the supernatural or the story of Christianity. But fundamentally, the values about loving each other and doing your best and empathy and all this kind of stuff, we all share that. And that's, I think, why our conversations are so respectful.
And ironically, and this is the strangest irony of all of this, and what you've said is 100% correct, is that we all emulate the character of whom they claim is real and who we claim isn't necessarily, and that is the values of Christ and the teachings. Our values are what bring us together to have a good, debate respectfully. And it's bizarre that it's about the same values. And I mean, let's also be real. Jesus wasn't the first person who taught about values. In fact, he was at the end of a very long list of, for thousands of years, who people also said that. I mean, but Jesus is one that many have selected, and there are others that other people have selected. But I think
that the good thing about this is it is a debate, but it doesn't look like a debate because it's actually in the it's in the spirit of what a debate actually should be, in the sense of two parties attempting to understand the other's position. And 99% of debates that I've seen in my whole life, that actually isn't the case. And this is why apologetics, I think, doesn't work, because you go into something and you see these debates and it's, say Christopher Hitchens versus William Lane Craig or someone. It's
that's the perfect example.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? And really, neither has any interest in understanding the other party. It's more just they're trying to prove their point of view. And scoring points, and it's not a debate. It might be interesting to watch, but no one comes away really any richer, and no one's position has changed. All the atheists that watch that walk away going, Christopher Hitchens dominated. All of the Christians walk away from that going, geez, William Lane Craig did well, didn't he? He won that. And no one learns. But we have a discussion where it's like, it's unusual because it's unexpected.
See,
Because there's
I would
actually
never say on this podcast, nor have I, and I hope that I never do, is that I am unchangeable. Forget it. Whatever you say, forget it. I wasn't a believer. I changed the most dramatic and massive change in my life to follow Jesus for 25 years. So if anyone
Bloody
said,
flip
Rowie, your
floppers.
mind's closed, my mind isn't closed. It's clearly open. I'm open to the truth. I don't care where it comes from or who it comes from. I am just interested in the truth. If you guys can shed some light on that, great. We would talk about it or whatever. I mean, it's not about, I look at the possibility of changing depending on the evidence that's put before me. I can't be more open than that. You know, I
bet
mean, I
he's a
think
bloody
that's a
swinging
fair
voter
word.
too.
Sorry? You
I
what?
said, I bet you're a bloody swinging voter as well.
Damn straight I am. Put me in a park with a seesaw and a swing and I'm laughing. The other thing before we move on to Rich, God bless his little cotton socks sitting in the background there, just, you know,
Observing,
observing.
omnipotent.
The only thing I would mention, and I didn't do this as a Christian person, we taught our kids and went to church and other. Having done that now, I would look back and said, if I did it again, I would not in the slightest try and influence my children into what they should believe. I would let it happen naturally on what they see around them. I would teach them morals. I would teach them all the good stuff. I wouldn't teach them necessarily about there's a God. I would leave them to discover that on themselves. I don't think it's fair that parents should make the decision to make sure their kids are following in their footsteps. I think that's a mistake, but that's my personal opinion on it. Rich, Luke, you guys have got the most similar backgrounds, I guess. Is that what he talked about ring true with you and with your girls?
Yeah, we had far less intentionality behind it. Like Jason was saying, it's like popular culture, and to swim against that is to set your kids up for ostracization, I guess. It reminds me of this one poor kid. He was a Jehovah's Witness when there weren't, J-dubs were far less popular than they are even today. And his one was he wasn't allowed to celebrate birthdays. A kid who's not allowed to celebrate birthdays, you're right on the outs of that, So you go along with it, and it's sensible. But there's one thing I've been thinking about this because our girls are well grown now. Thinking about these characters, the Tooth Fairy, etc. I wouldn't characterize them as lies or deception at all, any more than a science fiction book is a lie or Pride and Prejudice is a deception. That they function, I think these things function more like literature in our culture, like a lived out story rather than a lie to try and, in the best way. There are parents who manipulate Santa to manipulate their children's behavior. You better be good. The last couple of months, they're like trying to force good behavior.
We do that with God as well. We
yeah,
talk about the similarities,
exactly.
but the differences. The similarities are we call them both father. They both keep a list of who's naughty and nice, and they've both got a big beard.
Exactly, yeah. So in its worst, both manifestations at its worst is like this manipulative thing. But I think at its best, and some of the stuff that Luke was saying is probably more towards that, it's popular culture, so go along with it. But you're living out a drama that basically says, there is some wonder to the world that we can be a part of, its very best. And so rather than being a lie, it's more like an extended play that you're playing out. And as the kids, and the best way is as the older kids start getting it, is to include them in the wonder making part of this thing, bringing joy and fun, and it's a bit of the culture that we, everybody does it. We don't, like, if we were born in Western Europe 300 years ago, popular culture would have been the liturgical calendar, the saints. So you'd be right into that. Instead of having Father Christmas, you'd have all sorts of stories of the saints and the miracles, and they'd function almost identically, I think, from what I've read. So it's just another way of living it out. So I think for parents who are worried about it, it's like, as you said, Jace, it's a part of the culture, enjoy it. But I think if you do it well, don't use Santa as a thing to manipulate your kids, but as a way of bringing joy to the family and that kind of thing. I think then you're going to be fine. And, there are going to be a few people like poor Roby who are traumatized by the knowledge that Santa wasn't real. I don't know how to transition the kids out of it. All of ours sort of just happened naturally. And I think it's because it's a big culture thing. When most of the kids that believe in it, you all sort of have this way of transitioning into maturity, and it's a part of childhood development. So I think that's all fine. And it's funny, I was reflecting on the Santa versus God motif. Like, are they similar? Are they different? And I grew up in a church where there was definite battle lines, like some families, like, absolute, how dare you include Santa? It's like absolute, you've left the faith to do such a thing. I was like, why such an extreme reaction? My personal reflection on years and years of observing this over and over again, I think the ones that have such a terrible reaction against Santa is because Santa is a direct competitor to their view of God. There's very little difference.
That's
so
good.
their God is pretty much Santa. So if they've got Santa, it's a direct competitor. So they've got to you can't have him because we've got this guy that's very similar.
Have no other idols before me.
He's got a beard. He's watching over you. Christmas is for him, not Santa. And so there's a direct comparison. I think the more your God looks like Santa, the more you're upset that Santa's a part of the kids' lives. And funnily enough, if I was to do my time again, my view of God looks nothing like Santa. So I think I'd really double down on Santa probably. I'd enjoy him a lot more. We may even have had a fairy garden. Enjoyment of wonder and childhood imagination. You could read them a book or you could live it out a bit. I think it's all good. But I think if your God or conception of God looks like Santa, I think you're in big trouble. I think because then you've got arguments like there's no evidence for Santa, there's no evidence for a similar view of God. And if you've got a conception like that, I think there's no evidence of a being like Santa that is your God. Then you can reject that. There's a lack of evidence. If you're saying God is like this, a being in the world that does stuff, there's got to be evidence, and there's very little evidence of a big guy in the sky running around. So I think
Plus, if you humanize it like that, it actually then becomes quite scary in terms of the things that we do that we're already embarrassed about. All right, you go to the toilet, you're having a poo, God's watching. Right? You're making babies, God's watching. Right? That's embarrassing. I don't want to be humiliated like that. So do I stop going to the bathroom? Do I wear a foil hat? Do I stop making babies? I don't know. What do we do when you know that this guy is watching you all the time? And Santa is too, apparently.
And that's one of the most terrifying things as a child in particular, because they can't rationalize with that system and that belief and that what they've been told is true. But as an adult, when you're taught, particularly like Rich would have been with myself in a Pentecostal church, about the God watching over you. God watches over your every move. He knows every single hair on your head. I mean, that is awful. Who the hell wants someone, granddaddy, checking your every movement and wondering whether or not the way you're having sex is actually okay for God?
Or if you have some private Jace time or something, you know what I mean? It's like God's watching. What's going on?
The other thing I want to quickly throw in too, I think, which is really important, that you only have to change one letter in the word Santa
True.
to get Satan.
And I actually heard
And
that as a
he's
valid argument against it.
He's
I've-
read
yeah.
too.
Change one letter, and you got Fanta.
All Satan
Tash
is-
is in the background going, I've heard that preached.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Santa.
Like, from the pulpit.
Santa is the same as Satan, who's just a fat version. I'm sorry, but
In that
let's
case,
break it
possibly,
down.
if you're a Christian, you can't even have satin sheets, can you? Because that also sounds too much like Satan.
It's too close.
Correct.
It's too close. Plus,
The
it
funny-
also
the funny-
leads to things that God is watching over as well.
But I just think the whole idea and why I came to this when I started thinking about, because you look everywhere for belief systems and try and analyze and go, oh, where did this come from? Well, I never thought about that. I never thought about the buying children in a nice way, and we did it as well. We didn't do the fairies thing. I'm still looking, but the Easter eggs and stuff. We did that we still do it with our grandkids, and it's a beautiful thing. But just got me thinking about the parallels that are drawn in a simplistic way of teaching kids about things that aren't real, purely for the joy and the happiness of it and the beauty. It's
Their joy or our
stunning.
joy?
Well, both, because you get joy out of watching your kids enjoy that. You did that as a father with your kids until they grew up and going, well, Dad's lost these marbles because there's no such thing as Santa. And I used to dress up as Santa for well, actually, I managed to do it one year for our grandies. And the second year, they went, Poppy Pete, we know that you under that. I'm going, well, at least the stomach's real.
Well, I have to admit, I don't know if you guys ever did this, but going to see Santa in Maya in the city, that Christmas grotto that they had in there, I looked forward to that every single year. And not just for the kids, that was for me. I got joy out of it.
Well, we
I
used to
used to
go
work there.
after the kids were grown up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I used to work
Actually,
there. I used to
more
be
fun.
in that grotto in Maya as one of the photographers,
Okay.
photographing the kids in there, and some of the Santas that they had in there.
Yeah.
Let's just say I'm not sure that they ticked all of the boxes when applying for the job. You know what I'm saying? We'll just leave it.
It's funny you say
So
that,
there's
Jace.
too many handies. Houses that had too much brandy. Sorry, go on, Luke.
I was going to say, it's funny you say, just to bring this back to a more civilized conversation.
Why would you want to do that?
No, yeah, you know
Always
that's a
one.
joke.
Always one.
It just twigged what you just said to me then about how actually you wanted to kind of go and do that. And obviously we're joking, but there's an element of truth in all of that. And there's a philosopher called Slavoj Žižek. I don't know if you guys have heard of him, and he's very, very smart guy, but crazy thinker. His understanding of this, in particular the whole like Santa phenomenon, is basically think of it like a form of vicarious belief. It effectively says that adults participate in this because they want to go back to that belief, and they can't because they're grown-ups now and they kind of know all this stuff. But
Yeah,
the
I
way
get
they
that.
can participate in it is by recreating the belief in their kids. And so all of a sudden then it's like it becomes real again for a moment in a way. And it's like you get to be there, and even if it's through your kids. And then it's funny because at some point often the kids will grow out of it and they'll kind of realize that this isn't happening, but they don't stop. They will continue to play along with it because they see the joy that it's bringing mum and dad. So they're like, I'm going to go along.
Presents. And they're told if they don't believe, they won't get presents anymore.
That's a big part of it as well. But also it's like, it's this weird thing. So you've got like this dance that's going on, and it's like, it's almost like, I know I don't really believe, but I actually want to believe. And so I'm going to, and it's all happening on a subconscious level. It's like a psychoanalytical type thing.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting.
One of the other things we must remember, though, that there is a huge difference between Santa as a fantasy character as opposed to the Tooth Fairy or the Easter Bunny, is that Santa's origins are actually real through Chris Kingle. There was actually a person, when was it? Let me have just checked the dates. 3rd century. Santa Claus, otherwise known as St. Nicholas or Kris Kringle, a long history steeped in tradition. Today is thought of mainly as a jolly man in a red. So the origins, that's the
But Pete,
incredible.
you know, there's even something a bit more of a twist to this tale as well.
Yep.
The red suit part of Santa Claus actually comes from Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're talking about, you know, sort of the 1940s, 1950s. Prior to that, Santa wasn't in popular culture, you know, a plump guy with the white beard and wearing a red and white suit.
Yeah. Yeah. No, very true. I mean, look,
And just to add to that as well, Rowie, and to piggyback off Chase, the story gets even wilder, right? Because not only did that happen, but the origins actually go before Kris Kringle, before Saint Nicholas, right? And it goes well before that. It's effectively born out of the pagan god Odin,
right?
And there is that's the origins of it, and there's all sorts of stuff there. He rode an 8-legged horse, and Santa has 8 reindeer, and there's a whole thing. I won't go into it, but that was the origins of it. When what the church did was it co-opted this story and effectively subverted it into its own, and that's where Kris Kringle and Saint Nicholas, and that's kind of, it was like a rebirth of that, but it was taken something that was like this pagan idea. And what the thing is with pagan gods is they're ambiguous. They're not truly good or truly evil. They're a bit of both. That's just how it works, which doesn't really work in a Christian framework, right? Because God is good and only good. So it's hard to work with. So that's why it was basically co-opted and subverted. The cool thing about that is there's such a rich history of the church doing that, and not just the church, but even the Hebrews doing that with creation stories, with flood stories. They would take neighboring Babylonian stories and this and that, and they would change it and subvert it so that it's not creating something new. It's taking what was already there, but then altering it to reflect the true character of who God is. And I kind of see that with like what we're doing now with taking Santa, which is this commercialized pagan origins, all the, you know, technically Satan when you rearrange the words and play Scrabble, all this sort of stuff, right? It's like, but if I'm taking that and I'm using that to actually bring joy and wonder and amazement to my kids, and using that as a platform to help them understand there's more to the world that they see, that flows into a rich and nurturing, beautiful faith in Christ. I'm taking something and I'm subverting it and co-opting it to what I think is right and beautiful, which is there's rich Christian history in doing that. It's not about boycotting it. The church has never boycotted stuff. We shouldn't be boycotting. We take it and make it our own and make it reflect the true nature of God. I say that as a Christian.
Can I add another layer to this? There is yet another layer to this whole Father Christmas story. So we talk about the red and white suit, and we talk about this extra element that's not related to St. Nicholas or Kris Kringle, which is the reindeers and the red noses. Now, there is a type of mushroom that's called the Christmas mushroom. Mainly appears in those sort of Scandinavian type countries where a lot of these stories come from. It's called the Amanita muscaria. Now, do your own research into this because it will blow your mind. This is actually a type of magic mushroom that causes hallucinations. It was a mushroom that was actually used and dried as a food source. And when you actually dry it in that way, it does become a little more potent as well in terms of causing those sorts of magic mushrooms hallucinations. But one of the big things was that the reindeer in those Scandinavian countries used to eat those mushrooms, and they would also have a reaction to it. So a lot of the stories that we see,
they used to fly.
The flying reindeers, a lot of this, the structure of the story around Father Christmas has a lot to do with the use and abuse of magic mushrooms of a specific type up in the Scandinavian countries.
Wow.
Mushroom or Amanita muscaria, and it honestly, or look at it on YouTube because there's heaps of videos about it. It's brilliant.
Amanita muscaria. It's also.
I'm more hands-on with my research, Jay, so I might have to really go deep. I'm going to go deep on that one.
Also
Josh,
worth mentioning,
Scandinavia.
of course, the Easter has very long pagan connections. It was a pagan festival way back before Christianity. So it's amazing the connections and the depths between all of these things that we now just present to our kids in a modern kind of way, and it's a whole bunch of fun. We never talk about the connections, the mushrooms, the origins of Saint Nick and stuff like that. And
that's something else I'd like to explore. So between the three of you, let's think about this for a second. So we know now that Santa, as the modern incarnation of Santa, is very much around the Coca-Cola commercialized marketing impression. And then we look at what the popular culture image of God is, and it's the guy in the big white gown up there in the clouds with the long beard. But where does that image come from? Like, we look at all the ones that have been Renaissance paintings and that kind of thing, and what Da Vinci painted and all that, and so on. But this modern image of God as being a deity in the gown with the beard and so on, where does that come from? And how much does that align with the marketing side of Santa Claus?
Just
and
before
is that actually a smart way of thinking about God?
Just before we answer that, I just want to do a mention too to anyone who might be watching at the moment on Facebook or YouTube. Been a very quiet night. Fenton came in at 8:15 our time and said g'day, and we haven't really heard from Fenton. Love to get some feedback from you on because you're from California. How different is the I guess the celebration of Christmas and Easter and things like fairies in the garden? Is that something that you grew up with? Is that something typically American, or is that something not necessarily as strong? Certainly Satan is the whole bit, and particularly the Yanks have really taken a hold of what's it called, where everyone wears masks and looks ugly, like
Halloween.
Halloween is what I'm trying to think of. That's not where the origins are, not in America, but they've certainly taken hold of that and have made it their own. So I'd love to hear from you, Fenton. Anyone else out there, if you've got any comments after everything we've talked about with the connections that we've sort of made through fantasy and through things that we didn't know were untrue, but we were told about them. We loved them. They were fun. They were exciting. We eventually moved away as adults and realized that they weren't real. But then there's the whole God influence as well. So I'd love to hear from you tonight. We've got, what is it now, about 9:15? We did start late, so we might, if we're lucky, go through till 10 o'clock. That's Australia Western Standard Time, wherever you are in the world. It's around about 45 minutes from where we are at the moment. So love to hear from you. So Jason's question is a ripper. Who came up with the big beard and the flowing gowns and sitting at the pearly gates on a cloud, and with someone playing a harp behind him, or Stratocaster?
You got those, the Far Side, the Gary Larson cartoon, the Far Side. He always does a picture of God in a particular way. I mean, that to me is also, when I think about people talking about God, that's the image that springs to mind. But Luke, I'm guessing for you, and Rich to a certain extent, that's just an almost an offensive caricature, because it's so much more to you.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think you're onto something, Jace. Maybe Santa has been leading, like the capitalist marketing. Santa's actually led our view of what God looks like, rather than the other way around. I think you might be onto something there, because Christmas is, the part of the Christian calendar. Like, the reason why we celebrate it is because we were from that background. And now, if you take, we don't believe in God, we don't go to church, but we've left with Christmas. So what are we going to do with Christmas? Like, oh, Santa's perfect, put him in there. So maybe I'd see that in play, like in a popular culture. Certainly, Coca-Cola's got far more marketing dollars than the local Pentecostal church does. So the image of Santa is going to win out over a more, let's say, sensible, realistic, or historical view. I think you're onto something there. Yeah.
Luke,
And I think
trying
to look at
say something.
from a I've explored this idea because I'm doing some work personally on the idea of stories and this and that. And one of the stories that I was exploring was exactly this. Why is it that if you ask anyone on the street, you said, like, close your eyes, and you have to, if I ask you to think of something, you have to instantly tell me the picture that pops in your head, and you say God, they're going to say white hair, big white beard, on a throne in a cloud, with a white robe, and you probably can't see the face. There's never any description around crooked nose, or it's like it's just the beard, flowing hair, flowing robe. It's weird, right? And the big answer is I think the Renaissance and the paintings shaped us more than we even realize. That's significant with the shaping of how we understand and how we view. But it actually there's maybe 2 places in the Bible that sort of intimate this, but they're not literal descriptions of what God looks like. They should never be read like that. One of them is in Daniel, the Old Testament, the book of Daniel, which is it's a prophetic book. It's using different language and prophetic imagery and all sorts of stuff. So it should be read as such. Where it talks about a vision of God, and he had it was a white gown and flowing white hair like snow and stuff like that. It's vivid descriptive imagery. It's pointing towards something. It's not to be taken as this is what God looks like. It's the same when the story in Old Testament talks about how Moses hid in like the bosom of God, or hid in like, and it's like, well, we're not literally talking about this massive arm coming down and kind of getting in. But clearly this was instrumental in. You imagine commissioning Michelangelo saying, "We want you to draw God," right?
Yeah.
How the hell am I going to do that? No one knows what God looks like. And so and then obviously you lean into Scripture, and it's like there's a couple of things that kind of suggest this, and then there's artistic license to go with it. But that then shapes the whole modern understanding, which is further emphasized with modern stuff like The Simpsons, right?
Yeah.
Which is, it's like you think it's funny, but every time Homer goes up into heaven, it's there's a white robe, it's an old man with a white, and that has a lasting impact. And it's like, it's not even a bad thing. But the funny thing is,
him as the father, don't we? So it is a very masculine.
It's a father figure, absolutely.
That's exactly right.
If you think masculine, you often think beards, long flowing beard. That's a grandfather, and so suddenly we're talking about a senior male figure, and so it's not unusual to think that he might have a flowing beard.
100%. And it's this. There's a long history of anthropomorphizing God, like they're taking something that we can't actually understand and distilling it into what's familiar to us. And ancient cultures have done this. The Bible is full of that sort of stuff. Adam and Eve walking with God in a garden. Walk with God in a garden.
Way, don't they? I mean, it's
100%. That's exactly right. And also you go, well, this God created the whole universe. Well, he must be old. And old people have white hair, it's like, so there's definitely a projection there, but the link with Santa is interesting. I'm not sure. I know before Coke got involved in the 30s, Santa was a skinny guy who rode around on a horse. And next thing you know, he's jolly and bigger and all that sort of stuff.
And that whole structure that's been created around it about elves and the Christmas workshop and reindeer and all that stuff. I mean,
yes,
it's
not a coincidence.
The core concept.
Not a coincidence. I think that the original or the eventual look of Santa is very much what was stereotypical of the image of God as that father figure, as it was quoted in Genesis, whereas I think some of it came from. God created man in his own image. The scriptural passage does not mean that God is in human form, but rather that humans are in the image of God in their more spiritual and intellectual nature. And he conjures up the ultimate grandfather.
And by the way, what's Santa's wife's name?
Santa's wife's name.
Exactly. Mrs. Claus doesn't is it?
Merry Christmas.
Brilliant. Brilliant. But it's funny because it's funny. even in Genesis, we forget that. They go, it says male and female were made in the image of God. And so female, and I think I mentioned this last week or the week before, man cannot capture fully the image of God, nor does the female capture the image of God. It's somehow both. And that messes with a lot of people, right? And that's why people have this idea in their head. And this is really the only time where that picture of God as the friendly old man in the sky can become damaging and harmful, is when you are so tightly wrapped to that you can't let it go. And all of a sudden someone mentions, they refer to God as she, and you lose your mind because this is your picture of God. And you just go, hang on a minute. God is every much she as he is he. Like there is, when you actually boil it down to it, there is no, but we need to let go of these images of God. That's the whole point of an idol, right? Because it's something that distracts from the true nature of what God is. It's not about
the earliest writers who are
Gandalf.
writing about God and wanting to create an image would have done exactly, made it like an old man.
That's exactly what I was
someone
kind
in
of
the
asking
village who
Ed
looked
about.
like an old godly figure, and that's probably why they referred. Of course, they would never refer to God being a woman because they were completely.
So you look
sexist.
at Lord of the Rings and you look at the character of Gandalf and go, "There's a super powerful wizard." Coincidentally, he looks a lot like God as well.
Yeah,
Gandalf is also based on Odin.
Yeah. Yep.
Ooh, full circle.
Crazy. Full circle.
Full circle.
That's true story. Absolute true story.
We've got a
You're
comment.
right. And it would have made. Oh yeah,
that is worthy of fireworks right there. Is that going to happen? There we go.
A comment from someone who I can't read. I think it might be. Is it Arabic or something? That's a really. Wow, no, it's not Arabic. What is that? What is that language?
I think it's fancy.
It's what?
Fancy characters, yeah.
It's using a few different language characters.
Yeah, but do we have an English?
Albaboj.
Santa is a myth. God is a concept people worships. Santa is a myth. God is a concept people worships.
It's a good distinction.
It is good.
Well, Santa isn't a myth if we were talking about Kris Kringle and the origins of Santa. There's as much evidence. There is much evidence for Santa as there is for God. But in
the extrapolated kind of, the current incarnation of Santa is a myth. The story of somebody that would give gifts and that kind of thing, that has a basis in reality.
Yeah, and also it's founded in kindness and giving, which is always a good. But Santa is a myth. God is a concept people worships.
But Santa is a myth and is perpetuated as a myth. Sure, there are, obviously for kids and this and that, we will do this thing, but we all understand what is going on. Whereas I think it's a very different thing when it comes to God. And when you talk about evidence, well, I think the fact that there is an entire history of thousands of years of people putting together this understanding of God and, all the scriptures and all of that sort of stuff, it's a whole different thing. You don't have that with Santa or with the Easter Bunny or with fairies. There's an implicit understanding in myth. And I'm a big believer in myth. I think you can't just say myths aren't true. Myths are true. We need to reevaluate our understanding of what truth is. Myths are a way of presenting a truth that cannot be summed up by talking. It's like a parable in some ways. There's huge power in myth. We need to understand that word better. But I think Santa is presented as a myth, something that you take goodness and joy and kindness and good values, all that sort of stuff from, but we can't understand where it is, whereas God is not presented as a myth. There's mythology around God and stories in the Bible that are mythology that would point towards something, but the concept of the reality of God is never presented as a myth, as something that is.
There's one characteristic that they share, which I find a little discomforting. And that's that whole idea of keeping a tally of who's naughty and nice. And, you know, whether or not you're going to get presents is because you were good. Whether or not you're going to go to heaven is because you were good. You're going to get a lump of coal if you're naughty, and you're going to go to hell if you're naughty. There's real parallels here that are
100%. And
close.
totally. And this comes back to what Rich was saying, which I think was so good, was amazing. The closer your conception
Good on you, Rich.
He's come out 4 weeks on the bench, has done him wonders. I tell you what, he's fun.
Yes. Oh, drop right there.
But you know, if your conception of God aligns with that of Santa, you know, if you do the right thing, say the right prayer, go to the altar enough times, you get to go to the good place, and if not, you get to go to burn in eternity. It's like the closer that is to your conception to Santa, the more you want to separate the two. I think when you mature beyond that and you realize that's probably not how God operates, and if it is, why would you want to have anything to do with that? Then you can realize, actually, this is so different. And that's how I feel with my kids. It's like the conversations we have around God and Jesus and what that is it's in a whole different realm to the conversations we have in the Christmas season or when they lose a tooth or whatever. It's like and I know, Rowie, the proposition was there are kind of 4 of the same ideas and 3 of them aren't real, but what this one actually is, but they've never really been 4 of the same in our house, in our conversations. It's sort of, it's in a whole different thing. I don't even think they draw the connection.
No, I agree entirely. I don't think they're connected at all. It is interesting, though, that I find that the 3 most popular, and I'm talking Western world, I mean, obviously this is a lot of the things that we're talking about don't even exist in many countries around the world, but certainly the tooth fairy. Let's just talk about Australia, for instance, or you know, America and England, a tooth fairy, Easter bunny, Santa. It's interesting. I was wondering how there's never been, that I'm aware of, and you might be able to enlighten me, there's never been a kind of fantasy belief. It's interesting. I've just noticed when your face is the only thing on screen and you're counting out your fingers and no one can see what the hell you're doing, because it looks really stupid when you do that. But there's no kind of fantasy belief system that isn't based upon reward. You are not interested in Santa if you are not getting presents. You're not interested in the Easter bunny if there ain't chocolate eggs in the garden. You're not interested in fairies, or tooth fairies specifically, because you're going to get money from losing a tooth. It's an incredibly there's something about it which I didn't kind of really connect until I started really delving into this and thought, what is this all about? What is in belief that we're so reward based? If we want to do this, we need to get some reward. If we want to, spend money on a diet, we need to know we're going to lose weight. Everything we do is we're obsessed about getting a reward, and the ultimate reward, and it wouldn't exist, Christianity, I don't think, without the greatest sales pitch of all time, is when you die, you have eternal life.
It did exist. The early church, and this is the crazy thing. You look through
all the talking about now. Absolutely, that was an adaptation from. Yeah, there was never a promise or a thing.
And this is the crazy thing. You look at all of the sermons in the New Testament. I'm talking Paul, Peter, all of that initial thing in the Book of Acts. All of that. Not one single time at the end of any sermon or any promotion of the kingdom of God and Jesus and this and that, is there an altar call? Is there the promise of, if you believe this, you get to go to heaven? That's what this is about. It's not in there. It doesn't exist. That's obviously the formula now. But doesn't that strike you as strange that wouldn't be there, that Paul wouldn't do? It's like, have we missed something?
Because I think it was so close to the origins and the truth of the origins of what Jesus was talking about. It didn't need that. But then the modern adaptation pretty much just pushed all of that aside and went, hey, you reckon that was good? Check out this new deal we've got going on with Catholicism and everlasting life.
Just going to say,
this package, and it's like,
created all the stories, all the fluff
Yeah.
around it. And I wonder how much of that is related to stuff like what the Catholic Church have done, created this whole
Indulgences, buying
Yeah.
people's way out of purgatory, confess, all that sort of stuff. And
oh,
you know what
confession.
the whole thing, you know what the crazy thing is, as you were saying that, Rowie, around the reward-based system, the most ironic part of this whole thing is that was the single differentiator for me. That's what was so groundbreaking with the cross and with Christ and with the early church, was it was the first time that there wasn't a reward-based system. They basically said, Jesus did this, it's done for everyone of all time. It's done. You don't have to, whether you are on board, whether you do it, like there is no system here. He's done it. Like it's all done.
That's what got me
Now do you
hooked.
want to participate in it, right?
Yeah.
So it's not about participate in it and you'll get this reward, which is kind of what we've created now, right? Because that makes more sense to our human understanding. But the crazy countercultural, most amazing thing about what happened at the time was, hey, this thing's already been done.
Yeah.
Do you want to participate in this upside down, upending of the world to make it a better place in this way because of what's already been done? Not participate in this so that you can take part in what could happen for you. And it's crazy. We still talk that language now, but the way that the church and we function often in Christian circles is very, very different. It's the other way around.
How do you rationalize? Because it seems to me there's a little bit of cognitive dissonance here, because we talk about how all of that should make everything better. You participate and it should make everything better. The world would be a nicer place. But in reality, when we look at the history over the last 2,000 years, not just Christianity, but in the main, Christianity has actually been the actual fundamental reason behind a lot of the conflict that we've seen and a lot of the wars and deaths that we've seen over the last 2,000 years. So how do you like bring those two concepts together, that it should be making people better and the world better, but in reality, in a lot of cases, it's made things horribly worse?
Yeah.
I think, sorry, go on, Luke.
No, you go, Roy.
Well, I was just going to say, because I think the main difference is that the people who believe in God are missing the fact that we are an evolving species and we are incapable of being nice to one another across the board. No matter how much religion, no matter how many people go to church, no matter how much it's preached, no matter what, there's been no improvement in the way human beings treat one another through history. And if we have to do it by killing people we don't even know and have wars, let's do it, because that's what we are like as an evolving species of people who from the very beginning have been killing those who didn't agree or didn't do what we wanted them to do. So we've tried to dominate other humans and kill them. And all the religion in the world isn't going to change that, because it doesn't change the fundamentals of who we are. And I'm not saying there's a solution. Certainly, I don't think there's a solution. We just need to accept that we are an evolving people who are both beautiful, but we are ugly, we are cruel, we are kind, we are all of those things. And I don't think all the religion in the world can't possibly change that, because when you become a believer in God, you don't automatically wake up the next morning a beautiful, caring, loving person. Some of the biggest assholes I've ever met in my life have flown a Christian flag, just purely because they think it makes them better, and they're not better. You meet beautiful people everywhere who don't believe in God. You meet ugly people who believe in God. It's not a recipe for peace on earth. If it was, we would have seen some evidence of it in the last 2,000 years, surely. And to me,
you have seen plenty of evidence. That's the problem.
And that's what, yeah.
I agree with a lot of what you're saying, Rowie. But I'm sure everybody here likes our hospitals. Like, we like hospitals, we get to go there. That is directly out of the best Christianity could have offered.
Are you telling me that there would never have been hospitals if it wasn't for Christianity, Richard?
Because it's contingent, but we know that we do have hospitals because they came out of people who looked around and went, because of our Christian, not belief in God, but our Christian commitment to being like Jesus on this earth, it is our absolute duty to take care of those less than us. the outcasts, and that's how the hospital system started. Same with education. These two.
Do you know how many? Do you know how many atheist charities there are in the world compared to Christian?
No, but I'm saying there was nothing, and there still wouldn't have been anything without.
In the
It actually
Western
came out of. It didn't come out of
okay.
atheism. It didn't come out.
No,
It came
that's
out of
fine.
Christian.
We can
commitments.
applaud that, but what does it mean overall with the condition of the earth? Who cares that the Christians were responsible for hospitals? Hospitals didn't stop people from killing one another or starting wars and killing in the name of God.
But
I know.
what
I
I'm
know.
saying is
Those,
there is evidence that a deep commitment to the way of Jesus has had
Hasn't-
positive effects that have rolled down for thousands of years, hundreds of years. But
But
yes,
that's why the
certainly,
Crusades happened.
yes, certainly. I think the valid point is that there's some Christians running around who have this totalizing claim, which is if you have a mental assent, tick the boxes to agree with my conception about God, and it has to be totalizing. You've got to believe everything, and if only you did that, everything would be better. That's just, there is no difference between that and any of the other ideologies running around. Not, National Socialism, communism, cults. All of the totalizing ideologies end up in death and destruction. And I think that's very important that we draw a distinction between Christianity as yet another totalizing ideology, which is we've got all the answers for everything, as opposed to, I think, probably where we have seen good come out of, which is Christianity as a life dedicated to the way of Jesus. No matter what you actually say you believe, you're acting out of that. And I think if you can draw that distinction, I think you see a lot of the good that's claimed for Christianity doesn't come out of the structural, institutional Christianity, but far more out of these little pockets of genuine people doing the stuff.
absolutely. Look at it. And
Yes,
no
I
one's
think that's
denying
for
that.
me
Rich.
where I draw the line.
Yeah, I mean, there's no denying. I mean, I'm not putting a blanket across the whole thing and say
Yeah. No, I'm sort of agreeing with you with a sort of sideways slant.
Yeah. Just
It's an incredibly it's a volatile world in which we live, and people
Yeah.
have claimed for tens of thousands of years to have a solution. If you're a Buddhist, you if you're a Jain, you're cool. If you're a Hindu, if you're a Christian, the evidence would show that the world, and which is why we did this, look at the world from an alien's perspective months ago, was to actually be able to take it in and go, look, it really hasn't got, it might have got a lot better in some areas, but that's negated by the destruction and the demise of civilizations that were once beautiful. Look at Israel. I mean, I know.
I don't care what you guys believe in. I don't care what you believe in. Why can't you just be nice to each other?
Mm-hmm.
here's the thing, though, right? So here's coming back to like
Because
that original.
That's not the human deal, Jace. That's not who we are.
I disagree. I think it
And
is.
I disagree as well.
I mean, clearly you're wrong because the world is full of assholes.
Yeah, but they're the ones that are fighting in the name of their religion.
Yes, but you can't change them, and they won't change because that's how they're born.
You can't change everyone, but I think that innately human beings are good.
Well,
I agree.
evidence of the world would contradict that. I'm sorry.
No, it's weird belief structures that cause people to go like that. I think if you don't have a weird belief structure that's based around externally attributing responsibility, if you simply believe that the people that you're with are people that you should care about and help, and I think that is the social condition. That is how we've evolved, is to share within the communities that we live in. Then I think that means that we're innately empathetic.
That is how we have evolved. It's also how we have devolved. It's not just been all of this good stuff going forward, and occasionally there's some bad shit along the way. The human experience is an evolving people who have got their own whatever they want to do. If you want to be a complete prick, go for it. If you want to believe in this group because you think we're better than everyone else, the mere fact that we have so many thousands of fractured belief systems indicate straight away that there is no possible solution or way to bring them all together unless God himself comes down and says, okay, here's the deal. Enough. This is what we're doing.
Hang their heads together.
Hey?
What if he did that 2,000 years ago, but his plan was for 8,000 years? So here's the thing, right? So let me just chime in on this. Okay, so there's been plenty, far too many. One is too many, but plenty of religious wars. There are wars around the world today that are still based on religion. The Crusades is every Christian should learn about the Crusades. You know, we need to learn about our past so that we don't repeat the mistakes. And the way I see Christian nationalism heading, and this idea of power over and violence and employing that in order to do that in the name of God, is exactly the same thing that led to those sort of things. So we need to acknowledge the dark history, but we also can't say that that we have not progressed in any capacity and that Christianity has not played any role in that, which is what Rich was saying.
I didn't
right?
say that. I didn't say that.
No. But from my understanding,
I thought I did. Yeah.
No. I know you weren't saying that, but the mindset or even the view, right? And everyone's entitled to their view, and it's an understandable view when you look around the world and you say, look, we're a mess and we're never going to get it together. We haven't got it together in the last 2,000 years, and there's like we're just not. I get it. I have empathy and I fully understand that position. I also think the second that you adopt that position and say it will never get any better, so what's the point in trying? That's the seed. That's the birth of empires. That's the genesis of every single empire. This is the way the world.
I haven't said that either, by the way. Just clarify.
No. I know you're not, but I'm saying more of a I guess for me the Christian mindset is that no matter what it looks like, there is hope, and that you can participate in bringing up around the world. Again, not waiting one day for Jesus to come riding in the sky on a white horse and fix everything, but actually the real message is that we can participate in changing things in the world. It's not a Christian distinctive, right? There are atheists that do this. There are amazing people that do this of other faiths. But again, this is the Christian thing is we can participate in bringing the kingdom of God to the world around us, and it often will look very different to the way that the world looks. Now, here's my thing, and then what Jace was asking me was, how do I reconcile that with the history of the church and with how things look now? The way that I do it is by recognizing that we actually are going forward, right? So if you ask anyone around the world today, even the people that think this is, the world's gone to hell in a handbasket, right? Well, if you put them 200 years ago in their city and ask them, do you want to go back to 2024 or do you want to stay where you are? They will want to go back, right?
Objectively, not subjectively, objectively speaking, this now is the best possible time to ever be alive.
100%. 100%. Have we finished? Is there more work to be done? Absolutely. But is slavery a thing anymore? No. Does that mean that the story that we need to, that racism doesn't exist and we don't have a ways to go? Absolutely not. It very much exists, and there's still a lot of work to be done. Women's rights. Have we finished the story? No. Is there work to be done? Yes. Is it better for women today than it was 200 years ago? Absolutely. We are moving forward. I think, and this is what I've been kind of really dwelling on recently, is we get wrapped up and it's accelerated by stories of, hey, guess what? Jesus is coming next Tuesday, right?
Yeah.
I've done the calculations and turns out the rapture's next week, but the rapture doesn't exist.
And then when it doesn't happen, what does that say?
89 reasons the rapture's in 1989, and then it's 90 reasons the rapture's in 1990. Like, it's ridiculous, right? This, if we remove all of that crap, that distraction, and what if we were to picture this as longer term? What if the fulfillment of the mission happens in the year 6000? What if they look back then and they look at the year where we are now, 2023, 24? What year are we? One of those two. And they go, that's seen as still roughly the early childhood of the faith. And you look at the Crusades, you look at things like that, you look at fundamental evangelical, you look at all this stuff, and you go, yeah, geez, what a mess. They really stuffed it up, but they were stumbling forward. And what if peace happens down there? Again, it's not going to affect us. I'd still want to participate in playing some sort of role in that. But you go, maybe this story is played out long term, which happens when you give the responsibility to the creatures on earth. God could come down and sort it all out if he wants to, but then there's no part in it. He's just another dictator that just rides down from the sky. If you want to participate in it, if you want to create a legacy where actually the people on earth are the ones that bring the peace, bring the love, that truly learn how to love their neighbor, that eradicate evils like racism and all this sort of stuff, well, you need to allow them to play that out. And
so, Luke, you said before that pretty much people go to heaven, right? And there's no hell. Now that obviously there's no, nothing in between. So we're going to go to heaven. So we've all got these belief structures today that all vary slightly, and we've all got slightly different values and morals and ethics and so on. How is it that then we can all go to heaven and live in peace and harmony up there, but we can't do it down here?
Can I answer that? And
yes.
I think this is and I know Luke and Rich won't agree with this, but I think the reason why, Jace, if you're wondering why the world is so fractured, is because there are people who claim that their religion is the only connection to the one God. This is the fractured, what's the word? Relativism of Christianity is in itself the problem. We have Rich and Luke who believe that their way of getting to God, the only God, is right. We have the same people in Pakistan and India and Czechoslovakia and all right across the world who all claim the same things. And if we can't even come together and believe in one religion, one God, whatever it takes to get everyone to join together, to argue about what the world needs with such a fractured, ridiculous system where everyone claims that they're right and their God is right and we have the right way to get, and no one can get to God except through Jesus, or you can do it through Allah, Muhammad. Who wrote the song If We Could All Just Get Along? Australian artist, the bro with the fro, greatest song.
Nicky Webster.
No, Guy. He won.
Kate Sobrano.
He won. No, Guy Sebastian.
Oh,
listen to the lyrics of If We All Get Along, or whatever it's called. It talks about all of these people all wanting to just try and get along, and Luke and Rich, God love you. I love you both, man. But seriously, how can you sit here in Australia and say that this religion, your way, your God, your Jesus, is the only way that the world is going to come together? And as long as the whole world has a differing opinion on both of you, how can we possibly? What's the opposite to fracture? Disfracture.
And are all the Pakistanis coming into your heaven as well?
Hey.
Are all the Pakistanis and the Muslims and all the Hindus, all the Indians, are they all coming up into the same heaven?
Of course. They're all children of God. And here's the thing, what I said earlier, and I will answer your question, Jace, but just to respond quickly to Rowie, in my, vision of how the world unites, it's not an evangelical vision of once we all believe the same thing, then we can get on with doing stuff. I don't think that's a part of it. Do I think there's a different role you play if you follow the teachings of Jesus? I guess so, yeah. Do I think that if you don't, you can't participate in bringing that or doing the work of God? Absolutely not. Of course you can. You do it. They're doing it every day. There are people all around the world. So I think in the kingdom of God being brought into earth in the sense of widespread peace, truly loving our neighbor, eradicating these demonizing and the barriers between people, effectively think of it as the us and them mentality. As long as there is an us and them mentality in any capacity, there is no unity, there is no peace, right? So
How do you change that? How do that is it though, isn't it? That is the earth in a nutshell.
I mean, you change that by even in a society or in a structure that rewards demonizing others, which ours does. You want to succeed in empire, you want to succeed in business, you want to succeed in really any area of life. You need to scapegoat some people. You need to get on board with demonizing a certain you have to start taking sides. The minute you stop taking sides and you actually genuinely start breaking down barriers, and we think that would be a good thing, but you're ostracized, and you're called a heretic, and you're called like all this sort of stuff. And I don't have the answers. I'm still I'm stumbling my way in the dark, trying to figure it out, making mistakes every single day. But what I'm saying is, it's like, if you do that, and if you are willing to actually do that, but the only way you can do that is if you have an imagination that that's actually going to move the needle, and that something, even if it's not seen in your lifetime, will one day happen. That's how you participate. That's where I see Jesus, and that's
eternal optimism. I love that.
And it's ridiculous. It's an absurd hope. It is absolutely absurd. And I fully empathize with Rowie looking around at the world and going, why would you believe that? It's a fantasy.
Mate, there are people that fly planes into buildings and kill thousands and thousands of people in the name of Allah.
They're the exception.
What you're saying is just pie in the sky stuff, Luke. I admire you, and Jason says he admires the optimism. I admire the optimism too. It's crazy, but I'm way past that. You know, people jump on a bus full of people and explode, kill themselves just to kill everyone.
And I'm not extremists, Rowie. Extremists. Fringe. That's the fringe. The rest of us, the mainstream, I think we can do it.
Oh, bullshit! Seriously.
But I mean, we see this. I mean, Rowie, you'll see Neil deGrasse Tyson, right, or someone like that, telling kids that they can become scientists and they can better the world and they can actually participate and do sort of stuff by learning science and by being grounded and practical and rational, that sort of stuff. And we celebrate that. We don't go, you're a dickhead that's wasting his time. Why would you bother talking to kids? Because the world is cactus and it will always be cactus. We don't do that. We go, amazing. That's great.
Yep.
Now, because mine's coming from, I guess, I wouldn't even call it a religious standpoint. It's coming basically from the ways of Jesus, that countercultural, prophetic imagination of the kingdom of God, right? Totally optimistic, totally absurd hope. But that's actually that's the trademark. That's the brand. That's what set him apart. It was absurd. That's why Christianity was a laughing stock for the first 300 years before Constantine co-opted it and got on board. No one took it seriously because of that. It was like, yeah, okay, you go hang out with the poor and the marginalized. Good luck. We know how the world works, and that's not it. And yet somehow it lasted, and then it outlasted the Roman Empire, and it's still having an impact today. And there are fundamentalists and there are all this sort of stuff. But like Jay said, we cannot look at it and just base it on them. In the same way that we can't judge science based on a flat earther ranting on YouTube.
I just realized something. You've made me realize something right now. If I was to analyze Christianity and say, I'm taking away everything, all the learnings, everything else, ultimately what it's about is an optimism. It's about a view of the future that it's going to be better. And totally. I think that the similarity between you and I is that whilst I don't have that spiritual aspect, I have the same optimism that things will get better, can get better, should get better, and that I want to help work towards it. Because I don't have that spirituality, it's that optimism that keeps me moving forward and that gives me a rationale and a justification for my continued exertion.
Absolutely.
And it stops me from feeling nihilistic.
You have the optimism that is inherent in many human beings, and it's got nothing to do with God or religion, nor has people being encouraged to take up science by Neil deGrasse Tyson got anything to do with God. And you married them perfectly together there, Luke, which I think is not relevant. Becoming a scientist, as Neil deGrasse Tyson is encouraging people to do, you can't piggyback God on that. It's got nothing to do with God whatsoever. Becoming a scientist is so valuable to the world, not because of peace, not because we all get on with each other. It's because the world needs scientists. They're not going
To
to
get
be
better.
scientists. Well, no, not necessarily better.
Well, it's not just an intellectual exercise. Science is not just an intellectual exercise. Let's just
but
learn stuff for the sake of it. We learn stuff so we can improve
they're not going to be
medicine.
better people,
We
though,
can
Luke. That's
improve.
the point you're missing. They're not going to be becoming better people by becoming scientists. They're going to become better scientists. That doesn't mean they're automatically all going to be nice, lovey-dovey people who want to get on. There'll be psychopath scientists who fit in the mold of being weird and strange and mentally deranged and will cause havoc. Science is not
just all about thinking about those fringe elements, Rowie.
Because that's why we call it aberrant psychology. That's why we call it bad behavior. We label it as the aberrant. We instinctively know in our language that that's not normal nor the way it should be. It's something's broken. It's not like we all of our language structure and thinking around that shows that we know that's not how it should be, nor that we should accept it, nor that it's normal. Otherwise, we just call that people.
Yep.
We call them
and
aberrant.
what and what? What's the next part of the puzzle, Rich?
Well, we
No,
deal
I was
with
just
those.
saying it's interesting that even there's a lot of clues in the way that we just take for granted that there's an underlying structure in the way we think and talk that lends itself towards something more than a very nihilistic view of humanity in the future.
And that
it's interesting, Jace. I was just gonna poke the bear just slightly.
Hey, here we go.
Jace says he's got the similar thing to Luke, but I'd say, Jace, you've got absolutely no basis for believing it, whereas at least Luke's got something, hopefully. Although,
Well, how is that any different?
although, as I say it, you'd have to base it on something very internal to the human beings somewhere, instead of a broad principle that we have the container God to carry it. And I suspect maybe they're this exact same thing. We're just using two different names for something very, very similar.
Well,
You've identified it by looking here.
Jason just has that beautiful humanity. Jason has that beautiful inherent humanity about him. Number one. Luke has the same. Luke, I'm not sure, realizes that if he had no belief in God whatsoever, he would still be the beautiful man that he is now. That's the difference. You were a loving man before you met God, and you are now that you know God, and you will be after God. God has got nothing to do with why you are who you are as a human being. I'm proof of that. Jason is proof of that. What is the advantage of being involved in being connected to a club that believes has the answers to the issues of humanity? That if we could all somehow marry together, and I mean, what I'm saying sounds very negative, and to a degree it probably is, that it's not the motive, it's not the energy that's pushing me to be negative. It's to break down the stereotypes of somehow trying to justify the fact that we have a uniqueness in our religiosity with our belief in God, and we are somehow different than everyone else, and if everyone could just be like all of us, we would be together. And I'm sorry, but no matter how good salespeople you are, you're never going to sell that to me or to anyone, because it's just simply not true, and it's not justifiable, and it's not real.
Rich, Luke, I really, really, really want to hear your responses to this. But just to follow up, I'm pointing because on my screen, that's where Rowie is. Just to follow up on what Rowie said.
No, I'm over here.
Okay. If you were to unmarry the religious mythology, the stories, the belief in the supernatural, and come back to the fundamental thing that I think I've identified now amongst us around optimism, would that change anything in your life in terms of the direction that you're currently heading in, and the way that you bring up your children, and the way that you relate to other people? If all of the religion, the mythology, the story was pushed to one side, would it fundamentally change your behavior, or would you actually still be the same person, still be optimistic, still want the best, and to be empathetic and cooperative and all of that kind of stuff? Or is fundamentally, and the reason I ask this question is because I've got that old saying of, if the only reason that you're a good person is because you're scared of God, you're not actually a good person, you're a bad person on a leash.
Mhm. That's it.
Fundamentally, are you a good person without God?
Oh, yeah, I mean, hypothetically, for me, it's a moot point because I think
I get
the
that. Yeah.
fact, I think the goodness in us is inherent from God. And I think I don't. Sorry, yeah, but like, I don't think God cares as much about whether we believe in Him as much as we think He does. For example, now I want to clarify this as well. I do, as a Christian, like I'm not taking I don't look at Jesus as an ethical teacher. I'm not taking just the good values of Christian and an optimism and then just saying, but it's also nice to know where that came from intellectually. Yeah, in terms of my faith, I fully believe that I experience God, I encounter God, I believe in the Holy Spirit. So I believe that that God is actively working, not just in me as an individual, but also through me. That I can participate. That doesn't mean that people that aren't engaged in that can't participate in bettering the world. And if anything, it's not. And this is more in response to what Roy was saying. We get this sense, and the church perpetuates it, sadly, that there's an elitism to being a Christian. It's like, if you become a Christian because then you're better than everyone else, but then you get to tell everyone and give them the opportunity to come, and then they're the same, and then it's like, for me, I don't view it as being better than anyone, or even in a better position, or even having rewards. This is the weird thing, right, about the evolution of my theology. There is no rewards that I get that someone else doesn't get. It's more a sense of, I feel a greater sense of burden for those that don't have a voice. And they're an amazing activists like the two of you, like Suresh, who have that burden without having I get all that, and I may have that if I didn't have God. But it's a weird exercise because I don't know who I would be without God. But I know that it's more than an intellectual thing for me. I think God is actively involved in that. This is my biggest takeaway to finish off this thought is, and I've said it a few times, I'm a huge proponent of how our belief functions is far more important than the content of our belief. And this is where we get it wrong. When we make it all about believing the right things, we've missed the point. Because then once you believe the right things, you join a church who teaches you the right doctrine, and their statement of faith is actually the correct one out of the 20,000 that are out there. Then what? Are you now, and you've said the prayer, you've done all this, so you now believe the right things. What now? Now, I believe if you're in that, then begins a process of hopefully you understanding more and more of God and sort of really realizing that you need to participate in this thing. But often what will happen is there's an isolation. It's like, cool, I believe the right things. I can now wait for God to come sort it out, and you just shut down. And instead of actually participating in the world, you participate in your own spiritual development. Nothing wrong with spiritual development, but that's not the point of it.
Luke. You talk about spiritual development, but how is it that I've come to have pretty much the same values and ethics that you've got, but without all of that?
And that's exactly right. So that's 100%. So if your belief that that God doesn't exist is functioning in the same way that my belief that there is a God, happy days. I think that's
the outcome's the same. In that we help people, we're charitable, we're empathetic.
That's right. I think I can't see a problem with that, right? If you don't believe in God and it leads to a nihilistic view of dominating others and getting what you can and well, then that's a whole nother thing. But if you do believe in God and that still leads you to be racist, to believe in power over others, to to dominate through patriarchal submission and bad theology, all that sort of stuff, that's no better just because you believe the right stuff than someone who doesn't. So this is what I mean. We're going to come back to how it functions. And yeah, for me, it's no rewards. I believe God will reconcile all to himself in the end.
But
So
don't you think
I have no
it's strange? Don't you think it's strange, Luke, that and this is one of the things that always frustrated me about the claims that Christians make, is that there's nothing unique in what you're talking about. Jason has just put a statement to you that he is exactly the same way about morals and doing good and all of that stuff. And your response was, yes, well, that's God. But it's not God, because God doesn't exist to Jason. So you don't. What's frustrating about the belief system, and this is what I went through as well, is that
but it's not about whether Jason thinks God exists. It's about whether God does exist. And if God does exist, but Jason doesn't think he exists, but God still wants to work through Jason, God's going to do that. Like that's what I'm saying. It's not if I think, therefore I am. That's not how this is.
No. That's not why I hadn't finished. So you can't put that on to Jason pretending that God's actually influencing him, because as far as Jason's concerned, God doesn't exist, and as far as we're concerned, there's no evidence to prove that he does. There's no uniqueness to believing in God that makes you any happier, more positive, whatever, over someone like Jason or myself who doesn't believe. You know what I mean? If the only way you could create or believe something was because you believed in God, then you'd go, hang on a minute, I want this. I can't get this any other way apart from believing in God, and I want to be that kind of person. I'm in. But hang on a minute, you know what? I actually am that person. I'm kind and generous and loving and caring and the kind of person who has an influence on the world, on how beautiful it is. You're saying that either God is already influencing him or he needs to come on board and be a part of the party.
No, I'm not saying that. I said the way his belief functions. His belief is that there is no God, and it's functioning really well. He is contributing to the
belief
world.
Doesn't matter. It's attitude of heart. It doesn't matter what you believe.
That's how. That's how that belief functions. Belief or lack of belief. But the main thing is, it's like I don't know if I'm not saying Jason needs to come on board. But what I'm saying is, we are rallying against a conception of God that probably isn't God. This sense of this conception of God that is like, believe in me and I'll make you happy. I'll make you feel whole and you will be complete. But you can only feel that way once you believe in me. And that's a common thread. It's a common story. I think people who do find God do feel complete and do feel like I felt that. I feel that every day. I also think that there are people who don't find God, who feel complete and who feel whole. I don't think God can be reduced down to a skincare regime that's going to give you a little bit of a benefit or a self-help mechanism. The sad thing is, the reason that this is our conception of God that we're using to talk about is because this has been the dominant conversation. It's been because we have to give a benefit for people to come on board, but it wasn't always like that. What if all the benefits are already there? Now do you want to come on board? It's like Jesus has already done everything for you. There is nothing you can gain from following Jesus because he's already done it all. Do you want to follow him or not? No. Okay. Yes. Great. It's irrelevant what it's already been done. That's my conception of it, which removes the reward mechanism. It removes the sales pitch. It removes a whole bunch of the stuff where we really get confused and get it wrong. It makes things like an interfaith dialogue actually seem like a good idea, because instead of, a competition where we're comparing who's right and who's wrong, it's like, hey, we believe different things and that's okay. How do we work together to actually bring some love to the world around us? Would God not look down? The God that I believe in would look down on that and go, that's a conversation I'm interested in listening to.
But that's the God that you believe in, Luke. That's
Don't
the
worry
God that
about
you
having a
believe in.
conversation. Convert them. Make sure that they believe the same thing that you believe, so you can all go to the same church. Like,
Oh, lost your
Lost
audio.
him.
No, Luke, we've lost your audio.
It's not even muted.
No. So you're not on mute. It's just gone.
Gone.
Weird. Okay, look, just
Now-
to just fill in while Luke's coming back, the idea of
That
this
was God, by the
interfaith
way.
kind of discussion that's going on. Yeah. The interfaith discussion's a great idea, as long as atheists can be a part of it too.
Oh yeah, no, we count atheism as a faith position as well, so that's
It's
good.
not a faith. It's an absence of faith.
Just I'm poking the
Oh, he
bear.
bet hook, line, and sinker. Hook, line, and sinker. He's new at this, Rich. Just give him a break.
Oh, I've been waiting all night for something like that.
Yeah, can we hear you, Luke? Can you say something?
Am I back?
Yeah,
Yep,
mate.
right.
Yeah, you're back.
I just
Look,
switched.
I admire everything about you. I just, you know, as you know, I get frustrated when everything you say is coming from one place and one place only, and that is Jesus of Nazareth, the God that fits in with that, and everyone else in the world. I'm really sorry, but this is the only way. It's
But Rowie, even I as an atheist get it. I understand where Luke's coming from, because it's Luke's genuine belief. It's his core. It is everything. So he's
yes,
not
but
taking.
you
It's not a perspective. It's not an opinion. It's Luke's reality.
Yes, I know, but you also need to look at where I'm coming from, having been in that system for 25 years and being able to step back now and go, wow, I can actually now see what I was involved with. I could see what I was Luke. You could replace me for Luke, and apart from the sucky beard that he's got,
So
you
he's
know,
better looking.
no, I know. Well, he's a lot younger. His beard is the kind of beard that I'd love to have, but unfortunately, this is it. You know, so that's who I was. Wanted to be a pastor, all of that stuff, and stepping back, there's a clarity that you can see, which is very confusing for someone like yourself, because we have three different kind of people. One who's in it, Rich, who's very much has a different slant on it, and a slant which I find incredibly rewarding listening to be quite honest. It's like he thinks and says shit that I've never thought of, and going, well, okay, he's either a psycho or he's got some serious brainage going on.
Magic mushrooms.
That was the obvious thing I was going to say, but it's frustrating, and I don't do it out of any hate or dislike or anything to do with that. It's just that I can't understand how anyone can claim to claim what you've claimed and talk about what you're talking when it only comes from a tiny little place in Australia or any other country that worships Jesus, and everyone else in the world is wrong, or they've got the wrong idea, or they're not on board. It's like, wow, man, you can't make that claim, Luke. You really need to look yourself in the mirror and go, how can I say this? How can I make claim to Luke?
One of them's got to be right.
Being in Western Australia is somehow got stuff that nobody else has privilege to, and I'm right. Not you're not about being right and about wrong. I understand. I know you totally buy into what you're talking about. I totally get it. It's wonderful. It's fantastic, but
Let's
it's
say
not
we all have
fair.
our own truths.
It's not fair. Well, you can have your own opinions, but you can't have your own truths. That's the unfortunate reality, is that this can't be unique to this discussion here, Luke. Now, you can't claim that. It's not just about you, mate. It's about the whole world and every other person who worships the same God that you do, who believes in the same God that you do.
But I'm not claiming that it's true because I think it's true. I think it's true, and that's all I'm claiming. Is I think
That's
it's
your
true.
reality.
I think there's got to be one of them is true. Now that might be that there is no God and the whole thing is just a big scientific accident and it's going to play out that way. It could be that the true God is the 300 million gods in Hinduism. it could be that the true God is actually the God of the Christian faith, and that Jesus Christ did reveal who God was.
What are the chances? What are the chances of that being real?
I don't know, but I've dug into all of, and it's a whole different discussion. I've done the research. This isn't just, I've not been radicalized. I've really looked into it, and I wrestle with stuff like on a regular basis. I'm comfortable with all of this, and this is just where I've landed. It's the thing that philosophically and theologically makes the most sense to me. So therefore, this is how I choose to believe. Now, and the last thing I'll say, I know we're getting late, but this line that there is no way to the Father but through Jesus. Jesus is the only way. Like, I've only ever heard that explained as, everything else is wrong. You need to believe in Jesus, and that's the only way you get to heaven. But ever since I first heard that, that's never been the first thing that I thought of. I've always just thought of, well, all that is saying is that the function of Jesus revealing who God was and actually revealing the heart of the Father, and this is what God's like, and in all of that is the real event. And when everything is reconciled, it's all done through him. That doesn't mean you have to, and that's not what the text is saying, that you then have to believe what Jesus says in order to do this. It's just saying that no matter what you believe, no matter where you're at, this is the work that was done for the whole world. And there's 100 points in scripture that keep saying the whole world, the whole world. We tend to forget that. We make it all about Christians. But
it's a little bit presumptuous though, isn't it?
Yeah, maybe, but it doesn't affect anything for me.
No, it doesn't. But like, you did that on my behalf. Thank you. But I didn't ask.
Yeah, fair enough.
But yeah, and that gets back to you didn't ask to get born, did you?
No, that's right.
No
I'm still
one did.
pissed off about that as well.
Thrust into this world.
I did.
So
I mean,
I'm pretty sure most people are thankful they're here rather than not here. Most people. Let's not go there. If he's done it for everybody, I'd be just like, whether I believe it or not, cool.
It's funny, Rich, because I remember you saying a few episodes ago that on the balance, you lean towards the idea that it was created, everything was created, and I think I mentioned that I lean the other way because I've got this idea around, what do they call that? There's a Occam's razor, where the simplest solution is most often or most likely the correct solution. And whilst you attribute things to the supernatural, I kind of go, well, these clouds, God, all these trees, God. I'm not going to attribute everything to a supernatural deity, and I'm not just talking about physical things. Even when we talk about, the idea of what happens after we die, the idea that there is a heaven to me just seems like a fanciful story. I look at us being nothing more than another animal, and when we die, just like a chicken dies or whatever else dies. And I know you probably get great satisfaction out of the idea that there's more to it, and you have a special place in the world. But I am also very comfortable with the idea that there is nothing supernatural. I'm just another animal, and when I die, I die. Because the idea, Luke, that you mentioned around eternal life, I can't think of anything worse. That scares the hell out of me. Oh my God, doing this forever? No, there's nothing I want to do eternally.
It is quite ironic, isn't it? That as a sense of reward is so terrifying for so many people. which is silly because we have no idea. Do I want to die? No. Would I love to live forever? Yes, provided that it was something I wanted to do.
I like having my scalp massaged. I don't want that forever.
No. Do I want to see all my relatives? Well, not Uncle Bob because he was a prick, but that's different. I mean, it's like I mean, look,
let me say this. I don't believe in creation the same kind of supernatural creation you don't believe in, I don't believe in. The same kind of heaven you don't believe in, I don't believe in. The
Yeah, I
same
know,
kind of
yeah.
eternal life you don't believe in, I don't believe in. And yet I'm a
Yeah.
Christian. So
No, no, well, hang on, now, Chris. Rich, that's absolutely fine, because you don't need to believe in those things to be a Christian. That's not part and parcel, is it?
That's me. Christian without the supernatural.
And funnily enough, that's pretty much Christianity at the dawn of Christianity.
Yeah.
Because, I'll just say this one thing, just because I've been dying to quote The Princess Bride all night.
Yes.
The guy saying there, he says,
Inconceivable.
inconceivable. I don't think you understand what that word means, kind of
That's
thing he
right.
says.
Yep.
And I think a lot of Christians are running around saying Christianity, and I'm like, I don't think you know what that word means. You're referring to probably some folk, white, racist, nationalistic,
Yes.
folk religion. Christianity, the guys who wrote it, they were guys. But the guys who wrote it maybe have better say. One of the verses, dear friends, let us love one another, for love comes from God. This is what the founders of Christian doctrine and society said. Everyone who loves, if you love, Jace? Okay. Their conclusion was everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, because God is love. For them, the central reality of God was love. And they looked around and said, who knows and is participating in this thing called God? And they're like, do you love? Yes. If God's love, you're participating somehow.
Essentially,
Hey, priest,
you're saying this
who's
is a matter
in
of
charge of the
semantics.
2,000 person church, do you love? No, you don't even know God. That was in the beginning. And I think this is
But
a lot of what
semantics.
Luke is saying. So let's, you may not buy into the idea of God, and so you wouldn't have that thing, but realize that Christians' central claim is not you know God because you are baptized. That's how it is now. But from the beginning, you don't know God because you're baptized, because you subscribe to a statement of faith, because you attend every Sunday, you're a tithe, or you believe that God created the world in however. If you love, you know God. That was the central claim of Christianity from the very beginning, from its top theologian in Scripture. And so what it's become today, we call Christianity, but maybe we need to come up with a different word, and a different word is
We
empire
do.
religion, maybe, because
Yeah.
Christianity looked a lot different. You may not buy into the God thing, but let's not
But
confuse
I
what you're claiming.
also think, Rich, that love is optimism.
I think so too. It's the way it manifests in
It can't be pessimism, can
a
it?
way you look at the present toward the future with the eyes of love that manifests as optimism.
So love it.
Yeah.
And on that note,
Yeah. So yeah, interesting. So I thought I just bring that in there because we may not agree with this container, the way that Luke and I define what's in the container called God. However, there's a lot of what you're saying, Jace, that like you say, actually, there's all this stuff in this other container called Jason. I'm like, it's funny because a lot of what you're saying belongs in this container called Jason. I would say belongs in the container of God. And funnily enough, in the Christian scriptures, and I'll say this out there just because I find it quite interesting in the context of this discussion is,
Because you want to have a fight.
yeah, the original language. Apparently, I'm not a student, so I have to go off the top scholars of the day. They're discovering that, especially the Apostle Paul, when he was writing, he used to talk about God as spirit. Man has a spirit, or mankind, human has a spirit, and often it was very hard to tell which one he's referring to. Is he referring to God's spirit or the man as spirit? And there are places where he most definitely was using it without distinction. The great theologian of Christianity clearly taught that there is very little distinction between spirit as in God and the human spirit,
completely agree.
which is very different to what I was taught in church. But it's there in black and white. He would say, he would say Holy Spirit, human spirit in one breath as one thing.
I see
And
that.
so
No,
maybe it makes
I
sense
feel
that what you're identifying sitting in the container called Jason, and I'm seeing what's sitting in the container called God, they probably are the same container.
Hmm.
And that's how they thought about at the start of Christianity.
I think what we're working toward, which may be I would like to think it's the inevitable, is that we have more in common that we don't. I think we'd all agree
it's true, man.
on that. There's a deep love for what's right, what's human, what's kind, what's beautiful, what's generous. We're not
what's
people who are trying to pervert something in order to make it. And I think that what's beautiful to me, which just melts my heart and blows me away, is that we are all capable to coming together on the same level, the same vibration, call it some wanky word, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, kumbaya. Do you know what I mean? It is in all of us. And what's really important, I think we should all think about is that
is that it?
Jason,
No, is that it? I don't know how to do it. I'll stop that.
Clearly.
Close.
Your timing is impeccable while someone's trying to be serious.
Sorry.
And
He started it.
Point up.
Oh,
You need to go
no,
up.
he was all right.
Oh. My point is, amidst all of this confusion and contradiction and angst and misunderstanding and a desire to unite, it is actually achievable right here, right now, not by disqualifying anything you believe in.
Come on, that's it.
Not by, come on, Rich, not by
Preach it.
dissing anything, not by labeling or dislabeling, if that's the opposite, or unlabeling. It is actually possible for us all to agree here without saying, I no longer do this or I no longer believe in that, is for us to all understand that as human beings, strip off the labels, put them beside, don't chuck them in the bin, put them aside for a moment and realize that we are all human beings with the same desires. We don't have to label ourselves. We don't have to be a part of a group. We don't have to be a part of a clan. We don't even have to do anything other than to say we all agree that we want good things, love, peace, happiness.
Well said, Rowie. Well said.
That's all we need.
Respect.
We don't need to, we'll come back next week and try and tear strips off each other over another. But what we talked about tonight was a great thing. Was the amazing, I think, belief system that we have that integrates a whole bunch of fantasy and stuff that isn't real, that we incorporate with our belief of God or whatever. And we don't need that in order for us to be together, to just be good people who want good people around us and to be able to share in all of that love. And I think we've achieved that. And
what you're saying is it doesn't matter what you believe in, as long as you all believe in each other.
Yes. And the common goal is that we all believe in what's good. I never know how to pronounce. She's a friend of yours, Rich, isn't she? Or
Munyi?
Luke?
Yeah.
Munyi? Great discussion, guys. Basically answering what I've been wondering for a while. Oh, since watching this podcast. That was sent through quite a while ago, 10:15.
Okay.
10. Oh, okay,
10.
roughly 25 minutes ago.
That's
Thank you.
Time,
Munyi, is that?
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I know she's one of the ones that listens in every week and appreciates what we do, and we love your feedback. Fabulous. Great discussion. I don't know what we're going to come up with next week. On closing, what we might talk about last week, which is what we're going to do next week, which is what we're going to do last week as a part of this, we're also going to mention the possibility of having your sins, both from God's perspective and from the legal fraternity, your crimes forgiven as in, and this is interesting. I've forgotten his name. What's his name? Brand.
Russell Brand.
Sorry?
Russell Brand.
Russell Brand, who has been baptized. And he's been said, you were a naughty boy, but we're going to look at the possibility of having his sins, as he's on charges of rape and all sorts of amazing things. I've been a huge follower of Russell Brand for many, many years and loved what he had to say and was devastated to find out that he's just a creepy little boy. And so he's been baptized. And Suresh actually suggested talking about stuff like that with the Ganges. If you the power of the Ganges River being baptized and washed in that, when the dead cows floating by don't get you, it's so
Washed.
that's look you washed. Anyway, that's an interesting point. We might
I reckon.
I don't know whether we can get a whole podcast out of it or not, but we've been going. It's like 10:30 already.
So I'm assuming that the conclusion to tonight's episode, the essence of tonight's episode is this.
Beautiful. Rearrange Santa's name, you get Satan. They're the two big takeaways.
Okay.
I think so. I think it's as cliched as and obvious as that was. No, look, I just thought it was really fascinating the belief systems that we have and the interconnection with God and stuff. I thought it was great. I thought it developed into something a lot deeper than that, and it was fabulous. So, guys, thank you so much. That was amazing. Let's do it again next Wednesday. Rich, you were very not a part of it tonight, mate. You look like you're tired and.
He's still at Disneyland.
I'm still a bit jet lagged. So
Hawaii time.
Next week I'll be ready.
You got back over a week ago. No,
I got back yesterday, the day before. I can't even remember now.
It's a long journey to Hawaii.
Well, this was actually Orlando, so it took us like 36 hours to get home.
Oh,
Big effort coming on tonight, mate.
Oh, yeah, you did well. We didn't understand a word you said, but you did really, really well.
it's like 10:30 here in WA, but it's only 7:30 Luke time.
That's right. I'm ready to start my day. Amazing.
Thanks, guys. Thanks to everyone who tuned in tonight. We know there is a lot of you who don't necessarily ask questions or make comments, but we love having you aboard. Thanks to Fenton, who joined us at 8:14 and had nothing to say after that, but that's good. Good to have you with us, mate. Next Wednesday, the 29th.
That'll be it.
We'll do it again from 8 o'clock Australian Western Standard Time. An atheist. We have to do this too. I'm determined to make this happen. An atheist to believe in a past.
And a really good-looking guy.
We're going to do. And go. And if people don't believe there's a God, just watch Harley Reid play football, and you will be totally transformed.
I've been waiting for it.
Come on, mate, West Coast Eagles. Come on.
They're best. Lord. Greatest weekend ever. We should just turn this into a West Coast podcast.
Christian Petrarch is saying he couldn't even catch him. Was just like, come on.
Christian who? Clayton Oliver who?
Well, I think the fact that his name's Christian, I think, says it all. I'm glad there's someone on my side. Luke, go West Coast. Thanks, guys. Fantastic. Catch you next week. Thanks to everyone. Au revoir.
See y'all.